Okay, well, we might make a start. Welcome everybody to this morning's webinar. My name's Alison Airy and I'm the CEO of ACBC New South Wales. Now, many of you were looking forward to an in-person event this morning, and we're sorry we had to make it online at the last minute, but there was just a little bit too much nervousness and uncertainty regarding the pandemic situation in Sydney. So I'm really pleased that you've been able to join us online. We're really delighted to be hosting today's webinar with SinaPrise. It's great to be doing something on e-commerce. Despite the fact that there are troubles in the bilateral relationship, e-commerce does seem to be holding up pretty well, but you do need to understand all the complexities of the ecosystem, from marketing to sales to payment systems. And those are some of the issues that we're going to cover in today's webinar. Now, a little bit about the format. Shortly, I'll introduce Gerard Robb, who will give a bit of a presentation about the e-commerce with China and the new product that SinaPrise is bringing to the market. Then we'll have an opportunity for questions and answers. And I'd ask that you use the Q&A function to put your questions forward. Now, everyone's familiar with the chat function of Zoom now. Please use that to introduce yourselves and to make comments as the session proceeds. Now, given we're a relatively small group today, what I might do is, once we move to the question and answer and general discussion part of the day, I might promote everybody to a panelist. So you'll be able to see each other and we can have more of a conversation. So if you are eating your breakfast at the moment, you might like to just put your video on, take your video off, and just so that you're ready when that happens. And I'll certainly give you lots of notice before I do that. So I'd now like to introduce Gerard Robb to give us his presentation. Gerard's a great supporter of Australia-China Business Council. He's the CEO of SinaPrise, and he has a deep and broad commercial experience, particularly in Asia. He's had the experience of setting up a successful fitness business in Japan. He's also worked in the financial markets for JP Morgan, and most recently has worked in integrated resorts, I should say. And his last role was with the Star, where he was helping the Star with Chinification of all its operations. He's trilingual in English, Japanese, and Chinese, and I can certainly vouch for his Japanese language skills. And I've noticed that he's been emailing my staff in Chinese as well. So very, very much the trilingual. So Gerard, look forward to hearing your presentation. Over to you.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Alison, and Daja Hao, Zhao Shang Hao. I'm really pleased to be here today. Was looking forward to the in-person introduction and presentation, but as always, we need to be proactive in these times. And the great thing about modern day technology is that we're all still here, and I think we can still learn some things, and I can still add some value to the ACBC. So looking forward to presenting this morning. So really, the purpose of today, I'm really wanting to share, well, SinaPrise journey and how we've gotten to this point where we've built a product and a system that we think can be very, very helpful, really targeting Australian SMEs and businesses that may not have the capital and the reach to set up a business and operation in China, and setting up a WOFE, a wholly owned foreign enterprise type structure, where it can make things a lot easier in dealing, even with an e-commerce business, in dealing with China. We're really set up a platform that can assist from here in Australia, so that a lot of maintaining control of your product and your brand, all kind of straddling the great digital firewall, so to speak. I think I've had a look at the member list here, and I think you'll be clear on or you'll understand what I'm saying there and the intricacies. So it'll be quite detailed in the presentation. So I'll try and keep it succinct. But as Alison said, please feel free. I think anytime you can throw a question at Alison, and Alison, please feel free to jump in if you think I'm running too far ahead. So without any further ado, we'll whip into the presentation. So business name is SinaPrise, but really, probably actually before I start going into the technical details, as a backdrop, I don't think the fundamentals have changed. You know, obviously we could probably waste 10 minutes talking about the political environment, but that's not what we're here for today. It's about focusing on what we can control. And again, purely from a business perspective, okay, where is still opportunities? Underlying factors is the fundamentals of the China economy and consumerism haven't changed. I was reading a document in the AFR yesterday, just in regards to the US baby boomer trend that happened post-war 1940s and how that cycle ran. And there's a lot of parallels with Deng Xiaoping opening up the Chinese economy in the 90s and the millennials that were born then, and now their affluence and wealth and their outlooking aspects and how they want to consume. So that's the underlying market trend that has not changed despite any trade wars, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The other piece being is that, again, this SinaPrise model that we've developed is really focusing at a retail level versus a wholesale level. So a lot of these tariffs that have, you know, and tariff wars, so to speak, if you want to call it that, won't really affect at a consumer level. If you try and ship in big amounts of product into China and then distribute, well, you're probably going to run into problems. But there are ways, which we'll go into right now, that you can basically circumvent these current problems. So that's a little backdrop. So we'll move in now, basically problem solution at the start. So right now, as you can see, if we just look here, there was a great Daigou market, and that was a lot linked to the fundamentals of that was great flow of people. Obviously, the flow of people has stopped, and you know, all these Chinese nationals that have come to Australia to study, and even just tourists, that whole flow, the 1 million tourists per year that were coming through, all contributed to this great Daigou market. And so it was really as far as an SME or Australian producers, they addressed the problem of getting the product into China. So a very non-unified, inefficient manner, the Daigou fulfilled a great purpose or solution for Australian companies that produce product that the Chinese consumer wanted. For example, you've seen all these like bigger brands, and that trickles right down, you know, Bellamy's, A2 Milk, Bubs, for example, all their earnings have fallen off a cliff in the last 18 months. And that has a lot to do with really the breakdown of the movement of people. So what were they actually doing, the Daigou? And I think a lot of people, you know, understand, but just to summarise, they were really these four problems, key problems that they were really providing a solution for in an efficient manner, like inefficient, sorry, being that they're all operating their own little operations, not in any sort of uniform, but, you know, when you're talking of thousands of people and hundreds of thousands of consumers, it contributed to the great profit of Australian companies. So really you had for example, they were becoming the financial intermediary through, for example, Mama and Papa would send a hongbao to them. They would then buy product here in Australia. Then they would go and seek out the best logistics company, you know, that they knew, for example, in Lidcombe, and Australian owned and operated, but Australian Chinese. So again, in some ways, it was a fully linguistically, platform-wise, it was very China-centric, but they obviously being Chinese and can speak two languages, knew what to do, and would use that logistics company. If you were to send a Australian Western background who hadn't been educated in Mandarin or culture, if they turn up to a logistics company, then there's an issue in regards to even just communication. So Daigo fulfilled that problem. As far as the transactions, that was the intermediary. And then even just as far as the marketing side, you know, they're on their WeChat or on their social networks, sharing to their friends. They basically became a proxy for marketing. So they're all the things, there's some of the elements, and there's even many more that they were fulfilling the Daigo. But obviously now, why did it fail? Well, pretty much, you know, the borders went slam and we all know what happened. So they're the problems. So what we did with SinaPrise is have a really good look at to say, well, okay, how can we digitize in a way, how can we digitize the actual Daigo function, so to speak? So really what we did is look at, okay, what are the platforms that people are using? So without going into too much detail, really the solutions that were needed were a simple low-cost setup on a certain platform. Because currently you've got, say, Jingdong and Alibaba platforms, which if you've got a massive demand for your product and you're well capitalized, you can probably set up on those platforms. But you're looking at a minimum of $25,000 US just to get started, and then there are multiple other ongoing fees. So for the average SME, if you go to them and say it's $25,000 to set up and test the market, 25,000 US, they're going to be, you know, especially in current times, they're going to say, well, how soon can I recoup that money? So from that point of view, setup costs are high, big barrier to entry. On top of that, you know, the native platforms, Jingdong, Tmall, settlement Australian dollars in Australian bank account, that function is not there, so to speak. You really have to have an entity set up in China, a Chinese bank account. Again, another barrier. Solution 3, we've set up a system on the WeChat ecosystem, which incorporates WeChat Pay, which gives a great exchange rate just because of the power of Tencent and its market position in China as a fintech and big conglomerate. And then solution 4, and most importantly, is really the logistics. We've spent a lot of times dealing with local Chinese-run Chinese-Australian operations and integrating their platform with our WeChat mini program. So there's the solutions. What we'll do now is just move into what you would do as far as SinaPrise and setting up with SinaPrise. Pretty simple. And I noticed on our guest list here, member list, quite a few people that are looks like they're, you know, origin of Huarun and Chinese background. And so clearly, you know, as far as the detailed setup, will be very, very clear on what is required and what this means. Registering with WeChat official account, which really is getting you started. Now, this would be the SME or the company would actually own that. So they're not just getting thrown onto a giant shopping mall. They actually own their own official account. Most SMEs will have a e-commerce, Western e-commerce, Magento, Shopify, or WooCommerce. They're generally the Western styled products as far as e-commerce. So we'd take that and integrate that. So you're basically ripping a lot of the products and then setting it up within a mini program that is linked to the WeChat official account. So populating the inventory. Number 4, you'll supercharge through various partners that we have with marketing, depending on your product, where you go with that. As far as, you know, you've got your 500 limit WeChat groups, you've got marketing, other marketing platforms, KOLs, KOCs, WeChat banner ads, even on the Pengyou chain, the wall, basically like for like, so to speak, Facebook wall, which would really be like your Pengyou chain, which is a wall within posting within WeChat. And then obviously we all want to see step 5, we want to see the money flow into the account. So now this is quite detailed, but I will take people through it because I think it is really important that really what has happened is so far in Australia, you've got loads and loads of marketing companies that will help give you brand presence through various channels into mainland China or Chinese here in Australia and give you some sort of exposure, but it doesn't really convert to sales. So that's where the mini program is commercialized as far as transactionally the WeChat ecosystem. So if we have a look here, really this is really the flow and the mechanics of what we've set up. So if we look in the bottom left-hand corner, let me just flick here and you'll see the little bouncy ball here. Here's the Shoji, the Chinese mobile phone, which really is, I mean, all around the world, but in particular in Asia and China, is the link to the internet. So the consumer through their mobile phone actually will access the brand's WeChat official account and via the official account, or just directly into the mini program will be able to purchase this product. As we can see here, this little dotted line, this is where essentially the great digital firewall, and this is what causes all sorts of problems and challenges for businesses that are trying to sell into China, is that clearly you can see to the right-hand side here, you've got the Australian digital ecosystem. Then to the left-hand side, you've got China's digital ecosystem. Here you've got basically Amazon Web Services, and here you've got Tencent Cloud. So really getting a interface and crossing this digital firewall, making sure that both sides can link is hypercritical. So that's where we spend a lot of time with our tech team, a lot of time looking at all the glitches, so to speak, and bugs and issues that have been inhibiting a really great customer journey. So really, it's like a clockwise flow here. We come into the ecosystem. From a consumer point of view, they purchase here in the mini program. Then we cross through the funds settling through basically WeChat Pay. This is backed by an AFSL settlement in Australia, comes into the Australian merchant bank account. Merchant's happy, they've got their money. Also, the mini program is actually plugged into any of the major Western e-commerce platforms. In particular, Shopify is where we've done most of the work. So again, merchant point of view, they can see an order has happened. Again, they don't have to worry about linguistics. And also, because of integration with the logistics company, Australian owned and Chinese run, with their platform integrated, they come and pick up the product and then winds back at the consumer. So really it's a door-to-door solution at a retail level. They're the mechanics there. We can flick over this or go back to that, but that's really, from a mechanics point of view, the devil is in the detail, and that's where we spend a lot of time. So that's the mechanics. Now, this is a little bit more rudimentary, so I'm aware of time, so I'll flow through it fairly swiftly. But customer journey flow. So really, as a business, we're saying, okay, we've got to look after our customer, the consumer, but also the merchant is our customer, but this is the consumer. As we can see here, there's the lovely little QR code and a company that we did a trial with, a wine company. Incidentally, right in the middle of the whole blow up of the wine tariffs, we were able, through a Chinese logistics company set up here in Australia, at a retail level, still to get wine in within 7 to 14 days at a 1 or 2 bottles. So we got here the mini program, which you can actually access through multiple avenues, or the WeChat official account. And again, that linked to the mini program. So it can be shared, it can be scanned offline, online. So there's that O2O relationship. As we can see here, flowing along through the phone, there's the mini program. We open up. Anyone that's used the mini program will be very familiar. It's, the way I explain it to people that don't have as much experience with, say, WeChat closed ecosystem, is that it's a light app or a little light website, so to speak, within the WeChat ecosystem. Obviously more detailed than that, but that's the business functionality is similar. As we can see, we purchase, we use the WeChat Pay. This is where the details are quite critical. So as far as entering the address, and we make the payment. The next step here, spoke to multiple Australian logistics companies, and they didn't really seem to understand the importance of the Shenfenzheng, or the Chinese ID card, in speeding up the process at customs. According to our extensive research, probably 15% of product coming through China or into China had a, well, I'm thinking in Mandarin here, like the Haiguan is looking at the product. So they're going to open up a certain amount and inspect. Now, if there's no Shunfenzheng or ID attached in any way, shape or form there, it can be held up quite a while. So really from a consumer point of view, we don't want that to be happening. So what we've done, and this is what's probably taken up a lot of our time in the last year, is integrating with logistics companies so that consumer purchase through our mini program, and there's functionality that then within the WeChat browser instructs the consumer from their phone to upload their Chinese ID card, and then that flows through to the logistics company who has a database inside the Chinese digital firewall which talks to the custom database, and in effect ensures that the consumer is really only buying for personal reasons, and so they'll only pay, or the logistics company bears the cost at a consumer level of a small tax that comes through versus a wholesale tax. So that this part here, 1, 2, and 3, and 4, we can see the flow of how that would actually happen. Now, even more important is actually getting the product in within in a timely manner. So we quote and say that it's 21 days. All of our testing and initial client setup, we're finding it's getting in between 7 and 14 days. Now, if we have a look in here, this is the mini program, and for those members that are familiar with using the WeChat mini program, this is really just it's under Walter, as we can see here, which is my account. You can track your delivery process. So as a consumer, you don't mind waiting as long as you know where the product is. And as you can see here with a lot of our testing, clearly we can see there's a timeline of dispatch and a location, what depot it's at. And then here's my colleague in Guangzhou, Alyssa here, who was part of some of the initial testing, and she's received her lovely bottles of Pizzini wine in good order, and she received them in about 8 days actually, which, you know, is quite swift compared to using a lot of, say, let's say, Western run logistics companies here in Australia. So there's plenty of really good, or there are several really good Chinese, Australian owned and operated logistics companies. And that's really where we've been able to get this product in a timely manner. Okay, so that was the consumer's journey. Now we're going to go to the merchant journey flow. Okay, so again, we really wanted to look this through the lens of the merchant. They've got a lot of things to do with their business. China's not their only market, and most of them have especially had, if they weren't already trading online, have had that forced upon them in the last 18 months. And they're either using predominantly WooCommerce, Shopify, or Magento. So great part of the mini program and what we developed with SinaPrise is that each and every merchant will have their own, and it plugs in to their existing e-commerce platform to make it easy for them to manage inventory and ordering. So as we can see here, this is a bit of a Shopify view of what would happen with this transaction that we're just showing. So for example, here's your orders. There's an order of Rosetta Pizzini wine. This is only like a $20 bottle of wine here, so as far as testing goes. And as you can see, the merchant can see, okay, in Australian dollars, there's, you know, this has been purchased. So really there's not much difference to, or no real difference to, if it was purchased, say, onshore. The big thing is this universal identifier code, which again, through the integration, when the order takes place in mainland China, that triggers a transaction or a function that an email is sent to the merchant, and an email is sent to the logistics company with this number converted to a barcode, as we can see right here. So underneath, we can see there's a consumer name and address, but this is the critical barcode with all the details within that barcode. Logistics company will come out to collect from the merchant. Merchant, all they do is print this email out, stick it on the product. So again, they don't need to worry about having issues with reading Mandarin or any of the above. It's just this universal barcode is the key. So again, making it easy again for the other customer being the merchant. Here we go with actually some real-time pictures of the dispatch and distribution and the packing. As you can see, wine getting packed in the appropriate way that will make it through customs and to the consumer. And most critically, again, for the merchant, they want to make their sale and they want to see the Australian dollars sitting in their bank account. So AFSL backed WeChat Pay functionality, and also the FX really takes place via Tencent's mechanism behind the firewall, and then the settlement of Australian dollars into Australian bank account. Now, in regards to who is this suitable for, there's really 4 questions that we will ask. When people inquire, we will ask just really to make sure that we save everybody a lot of time. I mean, there's a massive market in China, but not everyone's product is for China. And there's also, you know, levels of development of their business and where their business is at. For example, number 1, is there demand in the mainland China for the product? So it doesn't necessarily have to be a certain brand, but is there a demand for that product? Is there enough inventory to sell to China? We've all seen issues where a company's product has been very popular and it's kind of boutique, it's an artisan type product where it's just stripped within days and then there's no product for another 8 months. Now, in that scenario, you probably have to look at limiting your product if you're going to and putting a real premium on it, and is that still going to sell? So they're questions that need to be asked initially rather than just invest into the platform and then realize that you're probably not ready to sell anyway. Is the product easy to ship? So we've really gone with companies and product that like a non-perishable or goods that aren't going to cause problems going through customs and just their size and shape, just purely practical issues in shipping. And then is it really worth your while actually going and doing this project of selling to mainland China, where have you got enough value or volume, which kind of links back to, you know, the inventory as number 2. But there's quite a few more questions that we can see here, that we have a list that we'll ask before we even engage. So we want to make sure we know who we're dealing with and they've really thought about their selling and their project that they're going to do is selling into mainland China, as we can see in these questions right down to number 10. So moving along, really, as far as this is more of a, well, basically how we engage with our customers is to say, well, we've got a clear commercial agreement where we really just cover off the basic fundamentals of engaging and then a statement of work clearly showing, okay, this is what we're going to do, and timeline and of how things rolled out, what we need from the client, all the basic fundamentals of project management, but still hyper important in giving our merchants a chance in setting up best for China, and really, in a lot of ways, testing the market without expending, you know, too much capital. This is the commercial side here as far as a platform setup. So really, SinaPrise the platform, meaning that we would set up your WeChat official account, your mini program, do the translation, get you at a position where you're visible and all the infrastructure is taken care of, including the Tencent cloud hosting and the linking, making sure we're through the firewall and set up. A monthly fee of $2.99 Australian. Again, if we compare this to the bigger platforms that are set up for mainland China, we're looking at a much lower entry point, which again, much more suitable for an SME to undertake. But really, the main thing is that we want to see sales. So a commission or almost a listing fee, so to speak, if you compare it to, say, Amazon charging anywhere from 10 to 30%. You sell a $20 book on Amazon, you're probably going to have to give them $2 minimum. So that we're just really looking at, we've done the figures and certain products we can clearly see that the merchant success would be the SinaPrise success. So we're not going to, at the end of the day, we want to give a merchant an opportunity to get into the market without blowing their budget at the front end. Indicative time to roll this out would be 5 weeks. A lot of that's to do with verification, dealing with Tencent to make sure they're happy with company extracts and all the documentation, and then businesses set up to run. So that's really the journey of firstly, the backdrop of why we developed this, and then 2 clear points as far as the customer journey flow and then the merchant journey flow in using this platform. So that's really, that's the crux of a solution that we've developed. And I understand that not every person that's listening as a member would say want to use this platform, but I think at very least, there's a lot of parts to this presentation that will stimulate that you can identify with your business and an issue that you may be able to extract an element and use that in your business. So before we throw it open to questions, thank you very much for everyone to actually making the effort to log in here. And thank you, Alison. Always great to be involved with ACBC New South Wales. And I think now more than ever, we need to band together and stay positive in our business focus dealing with China, because whether people like it or not, and it is the Asian century, I think this is where the growth is, and people-to-people relationship and business is more important than ever now that we hone that and maintain that. So thank you, and I'll throw it to you to Alison, and we'll work on maybe some questions or anything we'd like to talk about.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Gerard, and thanks for those really positive messages. I know that we're constantly bombarded with negative stories about the China relationship, but what's not discussed so much in the media are the opportunities which continue to be available. And I think this is a great product. I don't have shares in the company, but I would have to say that I do think that this is a really good solution. It does address some of the barriers, many of the barriers that I know particularly smaller companies face when they try to enter the Chinese market. And what's great is clearly a lot of linguistic ability and understanding of Chinese culture and the Chinese commercial ecosystem have gone into putting together this product. Now we will move to the question and answer session. As I mentioned earlier, I am thinking of just promoting everybody to a panelist. So if you are eating your cereal and don't want to be visible on the screen, turn your camera off. We'll promote everybody in the next couple of minutes. We did have a couple of questions from Sandy Rudd, and but those were answered. She asked about pricing. And she also asked about whether it was possible to access this program from third countries or just from Australia.
Oh, right. In regards to we've initially set it up for Australia because the key thing being is the actual each different domicile has a different financial regulator. So what is really hypercritical is, and again, probably the number one issue is if the money settles outside of your domicile, it can be an issue in repatriating it. So if you go along the line of, even for these bigger established companies, setting up in a free trade zone, having a Chinese bank account, even then you might sell $50 million worth of product. Then you actually need to work it, have different ways in repatriating that capital. That then the actual costs of setting up structures blows right out then. So, but back to the point is that currently we've set it up for Australia. The key point would be is those two. I mean, anyone can set up a mini program in a WeChat official account, and that's really where all these marketing companies, they've done that. But then actually linking it so that, okay, you fulfill the payment mechanism and the logistics, they're each and every domicile, and even like Tmall Global kind of pushes that back onto the merchant. Oh, you've just got to get it to one of our depots. But just getting it to one of our depots is actually a big issue. And that's where the costs can blow right out. So in answer to the question, currently, yeah, just in Australia. So really, we're really being quite discerning in and having like flagship customers that we partner with so that we can clearly show an example, and then we can possibly look down the track at helping, assisting in, even in Europe or other countries, but currently just in Australia to really prove the business concept. So that's, yeah, in answer to that question.
Fantastic. Now I see that we've got some of our attendees now as part of the meeting. Sandy, did you want to comment further?
No, Alison, thanks very much. It's a great idea.
Yep, questions answered. Okay, we've had another question from Sarah Chung, and I'll read that out. I don't think Sarah's on the webinar, but she's said, does the product meet Chinese cross-border e-commerce requirements? Conscious that the Chinese government is strengthening requirements for personal postage, Daigou, cross-border e-commerce. Could you comment on that, Gerard?
Sure. And that's probably where, issues such as, must be tested on animals product. Again, a lot of these things apply to if you've got a company set up in China. So again, this is kind of, if we kind of simplify it back to digitization of Daigou, that's where, even though it is set up online, technically speaking, it is still almost set up as if it's a Daigou kind of market. So a lot of the regulation that does exist in China does not apply to a merchant would set up in this ecosystem. But even more specifically, I understand your question in regards to, yes, there's going to be, there are further regulation in regards to actually a consumer bringing something in at a retail level. Really that's where we're constantly dealing with the logistics partners to make sure that we're abreast of all these policies. Our logistics companies will update us on a regular basis with, certain customs issues. And that is an unknown quantity to a degree where it can change. But we just basically keep ourselves updated on that on a regular basis and make sure before we sign up any client, we double check with the logistics companies and say, is there an issue with this product? Is it likely to be an issue? But again, in saying that, because you're not outlaying a huge amount of capital, it's not like if you set up on Jingdong and all of a sudden this product, or say Tmall Global, this product, then you can't bring it into China at any level. So you've just gone and blown 25 grand US at a minimum. So yeah, all we can do is keep up to date and make sure that the companies we deal with have been cleared to bring their product in.
And I guess looking at your staffing as well, Gerard, you've got a lot of Chinese language ability represented there. So understanding these changes is not the challenge that it might be for a purely Australian company.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really what we're trying to do is make it as easy as possible for all those SMEs that would love to get into this market, but, they don't have they can't afford to pay somebody 70 or 80 grand to, interpret and translate and be their eyes, so to speak, for China. They're just not in that position. And obviously currently in the current environment, they're probably less likely to be in that position. So that's another area that we're really trying to fill that gap.
Yep. Now we've got the opportunity for others to ask questions as well. We've got a few people appearing on the screen. But just while people are preparing any further questions that they might have, just a few sort of, I guess, more general questions from me. How do you think consumer perceptions of Australia are holding up? Certainly until very recently, I was quite encouraged that despite tensions in the political relationship, there was still very positive attitudes towards Australia and Australian products among Chinese consumers. So my first question is, do you see that as still holding up despite the tensions?
Yeah, look, the feedback that I have from, obviously I spend half the day on WeChat and dealing with colleagues in particularly spend a lot of time in Shanghai. Yeah, look, the sentiment is still there. And I think more just as a human person-to-person level, if people know there's a product that is good for them or it's aspirational or they, generally they just like it, I don't, at a political level, I don't think that affects it so much. And I think it also depends on what media, unfortunately now in Australia, we've got a lopsided media controlling, the rhetoric. It's not, and so if you just read, say Western media, then you're going to think that, the world's ending as far as trade with China goes. But then if you speak to the consumer, and I'll give you an example, a colleague of mine spends a lot of time in the Middle East, and he's on WeChat, and he actually bought, say a prestige Chinese car, and then all his Chinese friends were pinging him on WeChat saying, "What are you driving that for?" And they were sending pictures of their Mercedes and their Porsches or their European cars, which obviously are seen as still as the premium car to drive. And so that probably, in a very rudimentary example, as a consumer understanding what is quality, I don't think that'll change whether it's trading with whatever country. If you've got certain products that are, and again, obviously for Australia, the environment and quality of a lot of products that are grown here, and including wool products, etc. That will not change. So, and a consumer still wants what they want. So that's my take on the, say, at a consumer level.
Yeah. No, that's a really good example. People still want their quality vehicles or whatever it might be. Now, I got some longer term questions now about the Daigou market. And what's happened has obviously been quite dramatic for a lot of companies. Do you see, when borders reopen, and they will eventually reopen, do you see Daigou coming back?
Look, I'm sure it will. There'll be. I mean, it's again just at a practical level, just because there's a flow of human beings back in. I think you'll get a bounce, but then in a lot of ways, we saw some trends happening, like in China. They love the acronyms, the O2O and the F2C, or the D2C, meaning that basically the factory to consumer type scenario where people were more or direct to customer. That was trending just because of the evolution of digital ecosystems. I mean, basically Alibaba has kind of set up mini program type function, just like WeChat in response to them, where people are more and more confident in, if they trust the brand and they're confident that it is coming from where you say it is, then, I think there is more of a trend online. But in answer to your question, I think it will rebound for sure. Back to previous levels, maybe not so much. But again, if you take a long-term view, I envisage in 3 to 5 years things to somewhat normalise. And so I think the companies that are doubling down now and, for example, getting some sort of online presence, and a trickle could turn into a torrent by the time this Daigou market opens back up and people just start moving again. So again, long term, I'm very optimistic about the market. And yeah, definitely, I think there'll be more ways that people can move product in the future. I suppose the only issue that you would have on your radar is in regards to controls of product moving in and out of borders that you would have to, monitor.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. All right, now Sandy has her hand up. Sandy, did you want to turn your mic on and ask your question?
Gerard, once you're on the platform as a brand, and then you've got your WeChat set up, what happens next for brands? Do they have, how do they market themselves? Do you connect them to somebody on the ground in China, or do they, go into the Ethernet of brand competition? What happens for the brands?
Excellent question. Now, I mean, our key function is to provide the platform and the infrastructure, but this is a brilliant question because, you know, like you say, there's an ocean of platforms and the ether trying to market into China. So part of it will come down to, you know, using marketing companies and how much budget that you do have. And it can be trial and error, and obviously it can be very dependent on what products you are marketing. So, that's in short, that's my answer to your question. So, really critical that you do pick the right channels. I mean, just touched on it before. You know, you could organically market through Australia with, say, the limit of the 500 chat groups. For example, in Melbourne and Sydney, there's this mama group that, you know, really Huarun Chinese Australians here in Melbourne and Sydney who have a mother's group. They talk about product there. I mean, you could hit that channel and then indirectly that kind of filters back into mainland China. There's one example of a low-cost way versus a KOL where you might spend $50,000, but then you're going to have to sell, you know, upward of 50,000 to justify. So a lot can come down to your budget and what we would do. And again, Australia-China Business Council, who has a great network of marketing companies that are members, you know, we direct our merchants, depending on who they are, through these channels to help them. And one other thing I would say is that in a lot of ways, this platform can keep a marketing company accountable, where they're justifying so many likes, so many comments, so many shares, et cetera, but then if you can't see sales, then, you know, it's in a way you can say, right, we've set up this platform. It's in a very prominent ecosystem. Now, everything that you do, we would like you to, you know, make it, direct it to this payment gate, or basically where commerce can happen. So in doing that, say setting up on this platform, you're really holding your marketing company accountable to say, well, okay, now we're paying you this much money. We need to start to see, you know, a return.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
And money comes in sooner to the account. Is that my understanding, Gerard?
Yeah, so I mean, really, everyone's probably aware that, you know, you saw the wave of, basically what happened in the evolution in Australia with WeChat Pay and Alipay is that, you know, the major banks didn't want to have anything to do with them. They still don't, which I think is personally, I think is a lack of foresight. They complained it cost too much money. They even complained a certain Big Four bank that integrating Union Pay was a hassle, and yet I do know the figures dealing with the Union Pay guys in Australia. I think it's definitely been worth all the banks' while in allowing that mechanism. But back to the point, you know, so what happened is that this is offline, highlighting the fact that it is offline. You had half a dozen small Australian Chinese, so, you know, they've come out here and been educated here, great grasp of the language. They saw the opportunity. Most of them became an authorised rep of a AFSL holder, and then went and used their networks and set up WeChat Pay and Alipay, linking back to the mainland of China and offering that to the Australian market. Problem with that is very clunky, didn't integrate well with existing payment software like we're talking at the point of sale. So you walk into a shop. When we put in WeChat Pay and Alipay at the Star non-gaming side of things, so really for the restaurants and hotels, etc. Even then, that was a massive project in getting it to a point that, and even then it was still not as if you tap and pay with a card and then that just talks directly to the point of sale software. So that's how that evolved there. So all that really happened then is that what we've done is taken that online. So the actual function and how it happens as far as the FX and the international transaction, it really, to simplify it, it's like, in a lot of ways, it's like a UnionPay transaction, but it's just done through a different mechanism, being the QR code and the camera. But the actual mechanics of how it happens, as far as confirming you've got the money in the account, behind the digital firewall, making that FX, and then the money crosses border and back into Australian bank account, no different from online to offline in that respect.
Mm-hmm. And Gerard, are you the only company with this particular niche in the market that you're aware of?
Then, yeah, I mean, I've again, I've scoured the market for solutions when I've been consulting. And again, this is why we set this up, is that, to my knowledge, yeah, in Australia, for all the steps, we're the only company. Some companies fulfill some parts, but they're not the other. But really, to be honest with you, you know, the SME, and again, so many times when I was more on the consulting side of things outside of SinaPrise, these are all the reason we set this up is that all those problems that we went back to, if we flick right back to the start, you know, they would say to me, okay, you know, this problem, you know, we've got a problem here with, someone said they can set me up on Tmall, but, you know, then it's going to be too much of a high setup cost. And then a friend can help me, or a contact back in China can put me on Jingdong, but then we have to worry about getting the money out. Or so there was, you know, 2 out of the 3 problems might have been fulfilled, but then one of the problems which really creates the whole end-to-end solution hadn't been a solution for it, the product, the one of those problems. So then the whole operation really fell over. So in answer to your question, yeah, I don't know of anyone, and you know, I'm hoping that there will be more competitors here to really, well, intensify the competition, which always creates a better product.
That's very generous. Yes, I mean, I'm conscious myself of the companies that I speak to and the difficulty it is that some of them do face in returning a profit, given the large costs involved in dealing with some of the big platforms in China. So we're fast running out of time. If you do have another question, please let me know. Sandy, your hand is raised, but I think that is from before. I guess one final question that I have before we wrap up is how you found the partners that you're dealing with, because that's another thing people grapple with, is how to find good partners.
All right, excellent question. The thing that helped me was that, because I've been really, well, over the last 20 years been involved with Asia, on your journeys, you come across a lot of people. And fortunately, so in the background of the SinaPrise company, we've actually got 4 directors who are very active in certain responsibilities within the company. 2 of the directors are native Chinese, but have been in Australia for 20 years. So they've got a great, and this is a real critical piece, is that they've got a great understanding of the ecosystem here in Australia. They speak the language well, but they also understand how things operate in China. So we've kind of got like as far as the cultural competence, which I think is, without getting political, I think is critically lacking at a political level in Australia now. And a lot of mistakes have been made simply because I think people have got the right intentions, but they've just been advised badly on how to go about dealing with China, because culturally it's very, very different. So those partners that we found really were just, I'd had a lot to do with, so Roy Xie is another, is one of the other directors, and Dong Yue Yang, they're actually on the line now from Melbourne today, I think. And they've had a great experience as far as learning the ecosystem here, and then looking at, again, like me, really sitting on the other side of the fence going, okay, how can we bring this together? So in finding them, I suppose it's just really about going through chambers like Australia-China Business Council, meeting people, getting to these events and asking, well, millions of questions and even the hard questions that people don't want to ask. And eventually I think you can land on the right partner. So just trying to use all the channels that you have to meet people, I think is critical. And you know, that can take a long time. But that's my advice in finding a partner. So there's no silver bullet there. It's just like in any business, just getting out there and interacting with people, and while using your business smarts to work out who's good to deal with and who can help you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, well, look, we do like to end these events sharply at 9 o'clock, because people do have their days to be getting on with. And I know I think yesterday's announcement has probably created a lot of headaches for people, and people are now adjusting to the way we're going to have to do business, at least for the next 7 days. We would like to launch a poll, so if you could take a few seconds just to respond to the poll, Joanna, if you could launch that, that would be fantastic. While I give people the opportunity to do that, just one more sort of question, which is a bit irrelevant to China, but is of interest to a few of us on the line, is would you roll this out to Japan if, over time?
Yeah, absolutely. And probably, again, Japan's a lot like, well, as far as an open ecosystem, the way you would set it up, really, the only real probably gap would be, just on that, the Chinese consumerism in Japan and visitation dwarfs what happens in Australia because it's closer, and there's so many unique products in Japan as well. So in short, yeah, absolutely. But first, I think first things first, we won't get ahead of ourselves, really prove the concept and the model here, and then we would look at Nihon, Japan.
And would you set something up that linked Australian customers to the Japanese market? I think you were talking there about linking the Japanese market to the Chinese market. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, for example, there's a platform called Line, which is kind of mimicking a lot of the WeChat type functionality, LINE. It's actually a little green icon as well if you download it. Has high use in Taiwan because that's outside the digital firewall. And yeah, if I talk to my Japanese friends, we use Line. So you could literally copy that WeChat system inside Line. So yeah, long term, there's a lot of opportunities there as well.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you. So people are responding that they had a lot of insight from the webinar. Thank you, everybody, for participating. Thank you, SinaPrise, for this presentation. We'll put things up on LinkedIn and also on the website, so people are able to access the content that you delivered today. But thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and I wish you